Billy Joe Saunders beats Shafat Isufi in a unanimous decision to become a two-weight world champion. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Remstar Says So. Congratulations to Billy Joe Saunders and Frank Warren for getting another masterclass for one of his fighters over the line. There was a lot of bloody confusion and irritation for this fight in the build-up because Billy Joe Saunders originally thought he was fighting for the vacant title, and then the champion decided he wasn't going to vacate, and then he changed his mind and decided he was. So Billy Joe Saunders, after all that, was able to fight for the vacant WBO title against Shafat Isufi in Stevenage in front of a sort of home crowd, which were all sort of pro Billy Joe. Before the fight, you could see Billy Joe Saunders getting hyped up by Tyson Fury in the dressing room, and the big fat gypsy dosser, the massive ducker, Deontay Wilder, rematch ducker, coward Tyson Fury, sort of led him out into the ring. Billy Joe Saunders looked good throughout that fight. He looked really good. Ben Davison has definitely helped him get himself into better shape, and obviously he hasn't needed to take all of the steroids and whatever else the Ingle Gym was sort of shoving down his system. Ben Davison made him look very sharp, and he looked like he handled the weight fairly decently. What can I say? He's definitely not a natural super middleweight, but at 168 pounds, he didn't look out of place either. He definitely dominated these rounds, and I think he won probably 10 out of 12 rounds, and I'm being generous if I give Shafiri 2. Billy Joe Saunders was really sort of throwing a nice amount of combinations in, sort of leading with that right hand jab, and I don't think Shafiri has fought that many sort of southpaws before, because he just looked out of place. Most people know that when you fight a southpaw, especially when you're an orthodox person, you need to keep that high jab going over the right hand to try and have a sort of chance. But I think just the fact of fighting a left-hander just really fucked with his head and pushed him off of his game. Shafat Isufi, how do you say his name? Shafat Isufi. I think he went into that fight with 3 losses already, and I don't think he really thought he was ever going to have a chance of winning this fight. Billy Joe Saunders showed that there's a huge gulf in class between the two of them, and he really put on a clinic. He also managed to do the famous Billy Joe Saunders make you miss and look into the crowd. I was creasing. I was laughing hysterically when that happened. Isafuri managed to put in together, like, he tried to put in a little combination and he missed about 2 or 3 punches, and Billy Joe Saunders took a sidestep and looked to the crowd to huge admiration and cheer. And that was really like the highlight. It was a really one-sided fight. I've seen a lot of people saying that Billy Joe Saunders doesn't belong at super middleweight, but I don't see why not. Looking at the rest of these guys, I think Billy Joe Saunders, apart from Callum Smith, can give everybody a run for their money. When you look at it, you've got Anthony Durrell, the WBC champion, you've got Caleb Plant, the IBF, and you've got Chris Eubank Jr. holding the IBO. I think apart from Callum Smith, I think Billy Joe Saunders could beat them all. But he already sort of called out Callum Smith after the fight, and he said that he wants a unification with him. To me, that's fucking suicide. I think that's crazy. If I was Billy Joe Saunders, I would have went after Caleb Plant, because I think that Caleb Plant is probably the weakest link. Or I would have went for Chris Eubank, because you could have stuck that on pay-per-view and made a few quid. But I don't know. He's a gypsy, and we all know gypsies like to fight. I think the biggest issue in that fight, when I was watching it, is that Billy Joe Saunders doesn't have no fucking power. Sorry to swear if there's any sort of young people that tune in and listen to this show. I doubt it. I think this is only for hardcore boxing fans that listen to me blabber on. But Billy Joe Saunders was hitting Isufuri with everything he has, and he literally couldn't barge him at all. I don't know if it's because he's moved up to the new weight and 168 pounds his power might not be carrying, but he just looked a bit like lost. in there. But then again, Billy Joe Saunders, he's never really been known for having great power anyway. Now, if you think about it, his last fight was against Charles Adamu back in December, who retired. He got a points victory against Lemieux, a points victory against Willie Monroe, a points victory against Akavov, a points victory against Andy Lee. He hasn't knocked out anybody since 2015, and that was Johan Bloyer. He even got a split decision against Chris Eubank in 2014. Now, Billy Joe Saunders, he's not known for knocking people out. Let's put it this way. Out of 28 fights, he's got 13 wins by knockout, and he hasn't knocked out anybody of note, put it that way. But, you know, he's still a good fighter, and I think if he continues to train under the tutelage of Ben Davison, I think he's only going to look better and sharper. Obviously, Billy Joe Saunders needed to cut sort of ties with Dominic Ingle, because everybody knows that Dominic Ingle is dodgy as fuck, and he clearly gave him some sort of steroids. I don't think that Billy Joe Saunders would be cheating on purpose. Anything that he was given, he would have been picked up in that Ingle gym. I think Dominic Ingle's got a lot to answer for, and, you know, that's not the first time there's been any sort of outrage or sort of dodgy shit happening from that Ingle gym. The Ingle gym's been known to supply people with crazy shit over the years, and Billy Joe Saunders was just happened to be on the wrong side of that. But, you know, he's now a two-weight world champion. He's captured the WBO title at super middleweight, and he does have options. He was also saying that he'd like to fight the likes of Canelo and Golovkin, but at super middleweight. He said he didn't like the fact that Canelo put in that rehydration clause for the Danny Jacobs fight, and he said that he definitely wouldn't want to sort of fight Canelo with those sort of clauses put in place. When asked about a rematch with Chris Eubank, he said that he'd fight Chris Eubank again, but on his terms. And he also claims that he doesn't believe that Chris Eubank would want to fight him because he believes that he's a class above Chris Eubank. And he also thinks that Chris Eubank wouldn't want the fight. Frank Warren sort of butted in and said that, you know, it's almost impossible to make a fight with the Eubanks. And he said that he spent loads of money on lawyer fees and so on and so forth. I don't know. I think if you ask Chris Eubank Jr. right now if he's up for that fight, he'd take it in a heartbeat, especially on the fact that they could stick that on pay-per-view because, you know, Eubank is sort of turning himself into a pay-per-view star, whether you want to admit it or not. But yeah, like, I'd love to see Billy Joe Saunders campaign up here at 168. I don't think he needs to go back down. I think if you're fighting for the middleweight titles and you're not signed to DAZN, you're just going to get sort of left behind. All you've got to do is look at the likes of Jamal Charlo, who can't get a fight. He's been the WBC mandatory for, the best part of 18 months. Golovkin ducked him, and now Canelo's ducking him, and he's never going to see that title shot. So, yeah, if I was Billy Joe Saunders, I'd continue campaigning exactly where he is because I think he's in the right place right now. I don't think he's going to get a fight with any of those top guys at 160. He'd need to sort of leave Frank Warren behind, and he's definitely not going to do that because he's far too loyal. What did you guys think of the fight? I thought it was a good fight. I think Billy Joe Saunders completely outclassed him. I also like the fact that he was listening to what Ben Davison was telling him in between the rounds. He was throwing good jabs. He was throwing good combinations. I think maybe Billy Joe Saunders needs to get in the gym and start lifting some weights too because he hasn't got much power behind him. And I think if you're going to try and fight the likes of a Callum Smith who literally punches through people, you're going to need to come with a bit more firepower or it's going to be a short night for you, mate. But yeah, I'd love to see Billy Joe Saunders campaigning. I don't see the point in going up to 168 just to go back down to 160. At the end of the day, Golovkin had the opportunity to fight Billy Joe Saunders for undisputed and he chose not to. So if I was Billy Joe Saunders, I wouldn't be running after Canelo. I wouldn't be running after Golovkin. I understand, you know, wanting to fight Canelo because that's a big money fight, but at the same time, you need to take into consideration when Canelo had an opportunity to fight you, he wasn't exactly moving mountains to make it happen. Good fight for Billy Joe. Good fight for Frank Warren. Frank Warren adds another world champion to his stable. And as I said in a previous video, Frank Warren is really delivering for his fighters. When the whole thing with Gilberto Ramirez sort of came up, I actually made a video saying Frank Warren needs to deliver for Billy Joe. But, you know, Gilberto Ramirez relinquished that belt. And now Billy Joe Saunders is the new champion. So leave me a comment, hit like, hit subscribe, share this video. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. That's the end of the show because Remstar says so.